Hello, my name is Mark Sabelman. I'm a member of the Missouri Press Bar Commission. If you're a journalist who wants to use cameras or audio equipment in court, you'll want to understand the concerns and responsibilities of one important person, the judge. Under Missouri Court Operating Rule 16 governing cameras in court, it's the judge who decides whether to allow cameras or audio equipment and under what conditions. In this video, we're going to introduce you to 4 Missouri judges, retired and active, who've had experiences with cameras in court to share their concerns, experiences, and ideas. Trial judges have some pretty important responsibilities.
Well, the worst thing about having cameras in the courtroom is you always worry that something might happen that will affect the trial.
The judge is charged with according due process to the defendant in the case. That's how we always think about it, which basically means give the defendant a fair trial. At the same time, the state wants to pursue their case as they deem it appropriate. The defense wants to pursue their case as they deem appropriate. And we're trying to have a jury that's untouched by outside influences.
If the camera, having a camera in a courtroom, if it would prejudice one side or disfavor one side to the extent of making their ability to present their cases to the jurors a little bit more difficult, then I would err on the side of keeping the cameras out so that they can have or be more effective in front of a jury.
All of these concerns weigh on judges, particularly in criminal cases, as St. Louis County Circuit Judge David Vincent explains.
Criminal case is constitutional in nature. Criminal case, you're talking about substantive rights, liberty rights, a little bit more than a civil case. I would have to talk with defense counsel to see how his client feels or her client feels about cameras, because I don't want to intrude upon anything. Civil case, you may not have that kind of concern because if something affects the attorney on the criminal side, that may be considered ineffective assistance of counsel, and that's a constitutional consideration.
For all these reasons, when it comes to cameras, many judges start with a healthy dose of skepticism, like one of our interviewees, retired Judge Michael Manners of Independence.
When I went on the bench in December of 2000, I swore cameras would only be in my courtroom over my dead body. So it was the kind of thing I had pretty strong opinions about, because I thought that they would be a distraction. It might make the jurors behave differently than they otherwise would. So I was very dubious about the propriety of it. And the law is a pretty conservative profession. Change is not something that is embraced fondly a lot of times in the law, and the same thing's true with judges. So I was dubious.
Any judge, whatever his or her inclinations, will want journalists to act unobtrusively, dress appropriately, and obey the court rules.
In everything else journalists do, as in being in the courtroom, we want our journalists to be professional. We want them to be dignified, respectful of the environment, depending upon the environment at the time.
I think members of the media should dress in an unobtrusive manner. In other words, they should be nicely, neatly dressed, but if they come in wearing their Hawaiian shirts, they're just drawing attention to themselves. And I don't think that's the job of the media, to draw attention to themselves.
Even outside the proceeding itself, if you're in the courtroom or in the hall or on the elevator, journalists need to be careful to avoid any comments that in any way appear to reflect on what's happening in the courtroom, their opinions of what's happening in the courtroom. They need to be very careful about laughing in the courtroom, laughing in the halls, laughing on the elevators. I know that sounds so silly, but everybody else who's there is there for a purpose, and hopefully that purpose is the case that's going on in court.
Limiting disruption of the proceedings may mean limiting the times you enter and leave the courtroom or how you do it.
I think that it's inappropriate for a journalist to go in and out of the courtroom any more than I would allow any member of the public to go regularly in and out of the courtroom. Because when someone goes out of the courtroom or comes into the courtroom, it usually captures everybody's attention. And if the theme of media in the courtroom is be unobtrusive, I think that runs counter to being unobtrusive.
As to reporters or coming in and out of the courtroom, I expect them to do that because they have reporting obligations. And they know to be quiet. I never had a problem with any reporter or newspaper reporter or video person. If they have to use the restroom or anything like that, they open the door quietly. I think if I do have an issue with that, the bailiff will let them know. Have you met my bailiff?
You'll have fewer problems and do better with your reporting if you do your homework. That may involve speaking with court personnel in advance to work out coverage problems.
We have the advantage now of a lot of the pleadings in the case being online. You can go online and read about the case. You can find out what the allegations are, a lot of times what the defense is.
They need to take a close look at Rule 16 as to what that provides, and then make contact with the judge's representatives, the media coordinator, or the court administrator, or the court reporter, and say, is there anything that I need to be concerned about in coming into the courtroom while in that particular courtroom? And I think that your welcome will even be greater if you do that, because everybody feels comfortable about the role that you're playing.
One of the biggest concerns of judges is keeping jurors out of any photos or videos taken during a trial.
Two things really stand out in my mind. One is, and it was in the standard order that I entered anytime I allowed cameras in the courtroom, I didn't want anybody on the jury to ever be shown.
Court Operating Rule 16 absolutely forbids any photography of jurors, even in the background. Retired Judge Gary Oxenhandler of Boone County tells about his experience when a student journalist violated that rule.
In 2009, I expelled a young journalism student from the courtroom. During the course of the trial, it came to my attention that the journalism student was taking photos in the direction of the jury, and it was pretty obvious to me that that's what occurred. In fact, that is what happened, and there was a photograph published online of maybe the prosecutor in the background, fuzzy pictures of the jurors. And I will tell you, it was a terrible problem for me to have to deal with it, because I had to deal with it. So I'm trying a murder case, and I'm also trying a journalist's right to be in the courtroom and take photos of my jury. So even though the courtroom's open to the media, and even though it should be open to the media's got to be concerned that they don't become part of the story. And I think that, I don't know that, but I think that that's something that's preached to media students, journalism students. You don't want to be part of the story.
In a few courts, built-in cameras or special media room arrangements may facilitate coverage. These are beneficial for both the media and the court, but unfortunately, at this point, they're available in only a few Missouri courthouses.
I conducted my jury trials in what we called the technology courtroom here in Boone County. And one aspect of the technology courtroom is that we had a media room where one person would plug in for a group of media and would have the ability to make recordings and make videos of the proceedings. And so as a result of that, when media was doing their thing in the media room, it was seamless as far as the judge was concerned. I couldn't hear the cameras moving around. They were in the ceiling. I wasn't concerned about any photographs being taken of the jury. And so it was a great approach.
Ultimately, journalists and judges have a common interest in informing the community about judicial proceedings.
Best thing about having cameras in the courtroom, I think, is it gives people some idea of what really goes on in trials. This is not Judge Judy or anything like that. I mean, this is real stuff that is important to the people who are before the court, and I think a lot of times to the community as well. This was a case that had divided the community to a large degree, and I thought it would be helpful just to have as much evidence seen by the public as possible. And so I allowed the cameras in. There was no jury in the case, so I didn't have to worry about jury contamination. And it was at times very riveting testimony. I think it might have changed some minds within the community about what happened. There was a certain rigidity in the different camps involved, and ultimately I was proud of the fact that I allowed that to happen. I think it was important the public know about that.
The best thing about having cameras in court in this day and age of concerns about legitimacy is that it is a record that endures as to what's happening. And done right, I think the educational benefit to anyone who's watching is important.
Best thing about having cameras in a courtroom is transparency for the public to see what's going on in their courtrooms. These courtrooms may have our names on it. These are the public, these courtrooms, or at least my courtroom, is a public courtroom owned by what I consider St. Louis County residents.
The Missouri Press Bar Commission has put together this video to help explain the cameras in court rule and to facilitate professionalism by journalists in applying it so that everything will work better in this process. The Missouri Press Association and the Missouri Broadcasters Association are also committed to training their members to do the best job on cameras in court. For more information, you can look at the Missouri Press Bar Commission's Journalist Handbook, Reporter's Handbook of the Courts, which is available online. Thank you for your attention to these important issues and your professionalism going forward.